Hello, ghouls and ghoulies. Welcome to Scary and Bizarre Short Stories. I'm your host, Larry Lee Roden. This story is true. I know it is because I was there. If you don't believe in UFOs, listen to this story. As I said, it's true, and it scared the living daylights out of me and my friends. I hope you enjoy this story. It's called The UFO. When I was 14, I lived in the country at the foot of Bays Mountain. The old house we lived in was nestled on a slightly rolling hill. The front of the house overlooked a pasture and a bubbling creek. Out back of the house was more farmland, which wasn't farmed. That area was left in grass for our cattle. It contained an array of wildlife hiding in the patches of briars, weeds, and small cedars. It indeed was a beautiful place to live. Beyond those acres, the woods gently rose upward and continued until they became a mighty mountain. I spent many days hunting there. It was my sanctuary, and my love for wildlife and the mountain was incredible. However, the story I'm about to tell you isn't about nature and my childhood days of romping about in the woods and fields of an old farm. It's slightly different. It started one Friday night. My oldest brother Jim brought his friend Archie home to spend the weekend with us. Before we moved to the country, we lived in the city, and Archie's family was our neighbor. We had known Archie for many years. It was a clear night, and after the sun had set, my two oldest brothers and I decided to take Archie to the edge of the woods. We were going to build a bonfire and just hang out. Archie had always lived in the city, and when he came to visit, he couldn't get enough of the rambling green acres, creeks, and woods. Where we lived, you didn't see any neighbors. The old house sat alone on 600 plus acres. It was a beautiful place to live if you liked that sort of thing. It was apparent that my dad and mom did. We left the house around 8 p.m., heading up toward the edge of the woods. My brothers, Roger and Jim, were in the lead, and we took our little brother along, Jeff. At that time, Jeff was about 5 years old. Jim and Archie were seniors in high school, so they were around 18. Jim hadn't changed schools like the rest of us. Mom and Dad didn't want to interrupt his senior year, so Jim drove to the city each morning. Again, I was 14 and Roger was 16. We crossed the pasture and forded a creek, stepping on large stones we had placed there some months back. The rocks kept you from getting your feet wet, as the brook was 5 or 6 feet wide and maybe a foot deep. The moon was full, and one didn't need a flashlight, as the moon was so bright it lit everything up. Now that I think of it, it seemed larger than I had ever seen. We built a fire once we got to the edge of the woods. All four of us sat around talking. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the stars were brilliant. Things seemed perfect. Archie was a good sized boy with broad shoulders and stood around 6 feet tall. He played football with his high school team. When we lived in the city, we all knew and hung out with Archie and his brothers. If Archie was afraid of anything, we had yet to discover it. Things were going well, and the fire was bright. Suddenly, the trees behind us started moving. The leaves were full, and they moved back and forth like a mighty wind would blow them over. The limbs were swaying and being twisted. It was unbelievable. However, we felt no wind. Things around us were still. We looked up and saw a huge, round, black object hovering above us. This disc was somewhere around 100 feet across, maybe more. It hung over us, not moving. Here's the strange thing. It didn't make a sound. Yes, the tops of the trees were moving, but everything else was silent and still. I have to call it as I saw it. This giant UFO hovered in the night sky right over our heads. It scared the living daylights out of us. Archie grabbed Jeff and ran for the house. The house was a good half-mile from where we were. However, it didn't slow Archie down. Jim, Roger, and I took off in pursuit of Archie. We all ran, and the moon's light showed us the way. Archie didn't wait to ensure he stepped on the stones when he reached the creek. He went through the creek, sending water everywhere. Jim, Roger, and I were right behind him. I remember looking back after crossing the creek. And no, I didn't stop running. If I was going to be killed that night by some alien, I was going to be sure I wasn't by myself. They always say safety is better in numbers. Of course, I have no idea who they are. Anyway, I looked back and didn't see the UFO following us. I was relieved. With wet feet and gasping for air, we finally made it home. We told Mom and Dad our story. Dad didn't get out of his recliner, and I think Mom just laughed and said, "Well, I'm glad you didn't leave Jeff." I thought, Jeff? We were all running so fast that I didn't have time to think of Jeff. However, Archie had. Dad asked, "Did you boys put out the fire?" Uh, no, came the reply. I believe in a lot of things. I've seen more in my life than maybe I should have. Outlandish and scary things. As I grew older, I went looking for the paranormal, and not to my surprise, I found, heard, and seen many supernatural phenomena. Since that experience, I believe there's something on this earth besides us. I have researched the military files and can find no aircraft that can hover and not make a sound. No lights were flashing on this craft. Again, it was vast, dark, and silent. I have often wondered if her fire attracted this UFO. What did it want? Maybe it was just nosing around, being curious. However, I do believe it was of alien origin. Definitely a UFO. I have done some extensive research on alien UFOs and aliens. Many people have said aliens have abducted them. Numerous have seen UFOs all around the world, including our military. The Roten boys have seen a UFO, that's for sure. However, I guess the reason it didn't abduct one of us was because, as big as their craft was, it couldn't catch the Roten boys. I guess the aliens got a good laugh that night. They probably laughed their backsides off because we were running like a bunch of scared rabbits. We crossed the creek like a stampede of herding cows and didn't stop fleeing until we were home. I promise you this story is true. It's not something I just made up. I hope you enjoyed this scary and bizarre short story. This story is true and not something from the dark crevices of my mind. However, after that night, I do believe in UFOs and aliens. I just hope they don't believe in me. It would be fine if I never saw another spaceship. If you would, please subscribe and give this story a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. As always, thank you for visiting my channel.